we have another small input now, which is about a bit of a mini SWOT before and about when engaging and who engages in advocacy and campaigning. We will draw some comparisons between what local authorities sometimes can do. There is a bit of local context, but I'm sure there is a lot of transfer that can be done to other countries. However, at the back of our mind is that local councils are not usually specialized in working with migrants or on integration issues. However, there are other organizations that can, and partnering is maybe the way forward to make unexpected duties to work on towards integration of migrants, make it more feasible and successful. Basically, we are going to talk about understanding the pluses and the minuses, okay? And this is about engaging in advocacy in general, but in this case, it is, of course, on migration. So basically, when someone is landed or chooses to work in advocacy on migration, there are many issues. And basically, there is social integration, inclusion, multiculturalism, human rights, vulnerable groups, precarious work, refugees, asylum seekers, and, a lot of vocabulary that comes to mind, and areas in which one can work. And when someone is not totally dedicated to advocacy on migration, it finds it hard to know where to start and what to think of, especially when not given specific guidelines. And we would like to take a quick look at positioning, because when you come to local authorities, my question is, how much can they really do? And this is not a bit of a predestined failure that they cannot do. However, of course, when you are talking of public authorities, they are public. So one speaks of resources, financial, manpower, the jurisdiction and authority, skills, volunteering, etc. And also what they can really do within the community, because the community has expectations and perceptions on migration that are not always that friendly as one would expect them to be in a civil society. So local authorities may wish to do, but of course one has to depart from what can they really do, with limitations. That is why we wanted to do this quick SWOT. On the other hand, there are NGOs, and again, one has to ask how much can they really do? Again, resources, financial, manpower, because of course resources don't grow on trees, as they say. However, here with the community expectations may be the same, but different when they see an action by an NGO or by an association. But also there is also besides having perceptions on migration, there is also perceptions on non-profit organizations working in the field of migration and integration. Social media unfortunately has poisoned a lot. Many think that NGOs are getting rich on migrants. So there is also this enemy at the back of coming from social media and the media. If we had to look at local authorities on the left and NGOs on the right, the strengths are that local authorities are an official mouthpiece. They speak on behalf of the state and of a bigger government. They have recognized statutory authority. They have the power to do things, of course, and Malta local councils are very small. So, of course, statutory authority is limited, but representative anyway. And to some extent, they can pull strings, because in the end, they are part of government, an extended part, but a delegated part, decentralized part, but still part of government. Whereas the strengthening of the NGOs are that they are perceived as having hands-on approach, because that is why they were set up. And their team usually consists of people who have chosen migration as their field of interest. Whereas when in a local authority, you get the responsibility of working on integration, usually it is something that you got on your lap at times, unless you really, really chose it because you also maybe have experience or interest in the area. So these are the strengths of local authorities and NGOs. In this process, we're trying to see where NGOs and local authorities could work together. Weaknesses, local authorities have other things to do. I mean, it's resources cannot be overstretched. Also, local authorities, especially the voted members of the local authorities, have an expiry date until the next election. They can pull strings again, only to some extent. So while it is a strength that they can pull strings only to some extent because they are not national policy makers. They have to fit in to what national policy is implemented at government level. The weaknesses of NGOs are that they are often overstretched for resources and time, etc. Their involvement in many people's mind conjures either love or hate, as we said before, and they are not an recognized authority. And maybe in this area we start seeing where NGOs and local authorities could work together. One is an extension of the other. The opportunities are that local authorities can work with players from education, social welfare, migration, NGOs, of course. And actually, there are entities looking for the cooperation of local councils. I see from our experience, because local councils are already stretched, it's not always easy. But local councils can help NGOs and other organizations in a very big way because they are positioned to speak to the community, including the beneficiaries, the migrants themselves. Because maybe the NGO is stretched over a region or a country, whereas the local council, the local authority, has closer knowledge of the community, closer knowledge of the needs, and closer knowledge also upfront and personal with the beneficiaries. Whereas the opportunities in the case of engagement of NGOs are that they are equipped to help. And they're equipped to help with skills, experience, knowledge of the needs of migrants. But often they meet challenges in reaching out to the beneficiaries. And this is where NGOs and local authorities, this is what I'm sponsoring here, could work more together, especially in this case now that in Malta, local authorities are being asked to be involved in advocacy, whereas there are advocacy agencies that are equipped to do this. Working together, of course, makes things easier, I think, at least. The threats that the players in local authorities are elected. And this is, there is popularity, there is using popular discourse. Then they also, many of them represent political parties, so they have to dance between the lines, very strict lines. And local authorities can be limited by government policy or empowered by government policy, but they have certain parameters that are not always their decision. And I've had some conversations with people in local authorities, at least in Malta and even in Italy, and they tell you, oh, if it were for me, I would do this, but I cannot do because of party lines. I cannot do this because of, I'm part of a bigger authority. I cannot just behave as if I'm an individual. So there are limitations there. The threats with NGOs are that they are already often overstretched with resources and funds. And unfortunately, like musicians, many take the services of NGOs taken for granted that they can do it pro bono because you are non-profit, as if their expenses also grow on trees. Unfortunately, not like money and time and resources. So basically, we have the shared threats and opportunities on both sides that I would sponsor working together, because together I'm sure that the limitations of one actually supplement the other if you follow and reflect more about these SWOT analysis. In fact, we will send you out this PowerPoint even maybe for further reflection, because I'm sure we did not cover everything. The thing is, there are other players, not NGOs and councils, and they are like schools, youth organizations, religious bodies that can also help with the support integration, and reach to the beneficiaries, reach to the multipliers, to students, to youth. And one needs to be aware of what one can do in spite of limitations. As this is the optimistic part of it, that there are limitations on both, but in spite of limitations, one can do. We need to go start with a positive approach of when working with others and supplementing between local authorities and non-profit organizations or organizations working in the field of integration and migration. One can help limit the limitations of the other. And then, of course, the most important part, and this is why partnerships are important, the medium-term approach is necessary. The threat that local authorities often have a short expiry date because they are voted in and voted out, sometimes reduces the medium-term approach. And this is, maybe, we will talk about this even in a later slot, about leaving a legacy where your plan needs to think beyond, needs to plan beyond from when you expire. So ideally, if councils and authorities embark on advocacy activities on integration, they are not short-term, because that would limit very much the space in which one can dance. That is why we call this a bit dancing between the lines. This was a short thing. Are there any questions